What is up, everybody? The Accurate Zach is back, bringing you a new review for Uncharted 1. I meant to release this months ago, but it just one thing led to another. I never got it recorded. I had a little, outline finished, but I never got around recording it. But here it is. This is the day. Big boom. Here it is. So it's important to note that this is my very first Uncharted game. That's right. I have never played an Uncharted game. I did have a PlayStation 3. Although I honestly used it more probably for Netflix and like just multi-platform stuff. Like I'm well aware of the Uncharted reputation that it has in the gaming industry. It never particularly resonated with me. I mean, I love the Indiana Jones movies, and I know it's a fairly cinematic experience, but I never felt the need to play them. But it was time. It was time to catch up. So I did. I started to. I had a general idea of the gameplay as well. I knew it had a lot of climbing involved in it, and it was a third-person shooter, and that was pretty much it. I was fairly shocked by how difficult the game was. I played it on one step above the normal difficulty. I think the hardest is locked until you complete the game once. It wasn't a particularly intricate difficulty. It wasn't complicated by any means. But you could rack up some damage pretty quickly if you got yourself caught somewhere. And of course, I had plenty of platforming fails in some sections and some chapters of the game. I did very much appreciate the settings of the game. You're in the Amazon rainforest, an uncharted island on South America. There was also an underground base section towards the end of the game that was honestly probably the most enjoyable part of the experience, which I'll talk about shortly. Throughout the game, you pretty much had 5 skins. You had your forest, you had your subterranean areas, you had a bunch of your South American architecture, which was awesome. That was one of my favorite parts of the game, as Luna joins me here. Be petting her now. A large cathedral zone, which was pretty neat overall, and then of course the aforementioned German bunker, the Nazi bunker towards the end of the game, which is of course a nice indicator that you're in an Indiana Jones like universe if you're fighting in Nazi locales. As for the sound and graphics, solid, not particularly noteworthy. I got super fucking sick of the death theme because I did die a lot. And I would say a good 75 to 80% of my deaths involved platforming fails, whether I missed a ledge or just kind of wanged it a little bit and jumped off in a direction that I was almost certain I didn't input, but the game said I did. I'm not blaming the game. I'm blaming myself for being an idiot. But, I got so sick of the death theme. I wish I could have just turned it off. I thought about turning music off entirely. It got very frustrating. I mean, it was very, very obviously, even though the remaster is great, it was very obviously a PlayStation 3 game, which I'm not complaining about by any means. I'm just merely pointing that out. As the first game in the series, there were a lot of like awkward animations, whether it was during climbing sequences or the way he runs with guns. Like he looks ridiculous. Like go back or look at some gameplay. He looks like such a dope when he's running with guns, especially two-handed guns. Although with that being said, the lip syncing was surprisingly good, so that's a kind of a big round of applause for that. Gameplay-wise, there's kind of a lot I want to talk about. Honestly, honest to goodness, full disclosure, it was pretty frustrating. Like most of the gameplay was actually a very frustrating experience for me. Again, the combat wasn't particularly noteworthy. Hi, Luna. Hi, little girl. The combat didn't get fun for me until the very end of the game when you were in the Nazi areas fighting like the little Nazi gremlin golem guys. Like that was fun. There's actually a little bit of horror there because you're in an enclosed space. There's these new enemies that are hanging around and that are very, very menacing and gross. And you never know when one's just gonna jump around the corner or open a door, bust through a little vent, what have you, and that was very fun. But fighting just the derp enemies throughout the game was it was very tedious, and I'm not a big fan of, or I shouldn't say I'm not necessarily not a fan, but I'm pretty tired of climbing mechanics in games. But every action adventure sort of map marker fest game that have been really popular the last few years. Thank you, Skyrim. There's so much climbing. And while I do appreciate the architecture and the art, like that's the best part of any of the climbing. Like I did not, it wasn't varied enough in Uncharted for me to enjoy that. And it sort of just became, you know, autopilot, like, all right, let me find where I can climb up and jump and do this. And I know some of them were supposed to be like puzzles, but they didn't feel like puzzles. I didn't have a sense of accomplishment when I finally found that stupid little hunk of wood that is apparently climbable when the other ones that almost look exactly the same aren't. Also, chapter 16 in the vault, one of the much later platforming segments when you're with Elena, it was just Drake and Elena. I hated that. I fucking hated it. I almost stopped playing the game. Little butt pats for Luna. I almost stopped playing the game. I was so infuriated with how stupid that section was. You know, he had the swinging veneers or chandeliers, whatever you want to call it. Like, even if I was out of the hitbox, sometimes they'd still hit me and I'd go flying off and then cue the death music and then cue me screaming obscenity, not screaming, but saying obscenities and just questioning all of my life decisions that led to me playing this game. I did appreciate how fluid it was when you're out of ammo with this gun, so you just pick up another one. Like that had this weird kind of sense of commando, and you know, you drop the gun, pick up a new one, and just start firing. Like that was actually pretty neat. That was a cool part of the combat. Like you couldn't get very comfortable with any one weapon because chances are you're gonna run out of ammo on it, and there may or may not be a refill handy. Like you kind of just had to scavenge and use what the game gave you in terms of like what the enemies dropped. There's a lot of guns in the game, varying degrees of fun, but again, since kind of the floor enjoyment of the combat was already kind of low, they didn't really I genuinely think the best sequence was used up really early in the game, like within the first 3 chapters. You were in the jungle with Sully, and you finally got into, you know, the little subterranean area where they were looking for artifacts and whatnot, right? They were looking for stuff that Drake outlined for them, and it was when the camera turned around, and it, you know, it reminded me of the old Crash Bandicoot point of views, where you've got a big boulder chasing after you, or that big fucking polar bear that wants to eat you, and you had to time your jumps right as you know, the world was collapsing around you, and that was very fun. That was very exhilarating, and I was expecting more sequences like that throughout the game. And I point to another game that I played towards the very beginning of my channel was the Tomb Raider games, and there was more sequences like that in that game, and that was extremely enjoyable. Those were super fun sequences. I enjoy that. I mean, even if you consider like old 2D Mario games, like when the map is scrolling behind you and you have to outrun the camera essentially as platforms are following you. Though, like, those are super fun and stressful in the best way. But unfortunately, Uncharted 1 only had one sequence like that, and it was within like the first hour of gameplay. So I was very disappointed by the end when that was it. You know, I was expecting more and didn't get it, so the disappointment was definitely noticeable. Overall, I played to finish the game, not so much to have fun, if that makes sense to you. Like it just became sort of this challenge that I just wanted to complete so I could say that I did it, and so I could, you know, add this game to my list of completed games. But the fun ran out so quickly that I just had to motivate myself to get through it. Story-wise, I don't really have that much to talk about because there wasn't really much there. I mean, the best way I could describe it is it was a Diet Indiana Jones story. You know, there was an artifact you needed to get. A British bad guy didn't want you to have it. He wanted it so he can make money or gain power. I honestly can't even remember. And then, of course, you had a secondary bad guy, which it seemed to have some history with Drake that the game never really goes into. So as a player, I couldn't really appreciate. Like, yeah, I could see that they have some history, but I just didn't care. So, of course, the British bad guy dies by his own hubris and greed, and then you have to end up fighting the other bad guy in just a kind of a shootout chase type sequence. And the story didn't do much for me. I wasn't necessarily expecting it to. I didn't really necessarily want it to or need it to, but it would have been nice. It would have been nice to have some sort of substance to it. But yeah, again, it's a Diet Indiana Jones story, so I'm not really complaining. The characters, I already talked about the villains. They're very cookie cutter. They're very basic. I didn't really have one feeling or another towards them. It was pretty much full on neutral, which is honestly probably the worst you can feel towards a villain in any sort of antagonist role. Drake is the full package. He's sarcastic, he's witty, he never stops wisecracking, he's hot and muscular. And I like him, and Nolan North is a fantastic voice actor, and he really brings the character to life. But, you know, this Drake character archetype has been, you know, a big deal for a while. And you know, that sarcastic as hell, you know, main character hot guy is so played out at this point. I mean, you never really get sick of it, but you stop appreciating it in the same way. I like that character on Spider-Man, but you know, I don't know. Drake could have had some flaws, you know what I mean? Elena is whatever the character. Like she doesn't really have much of a personality. I mean, she's sassy and spunky. I mean, she's your typical female lead in this situation. She has the spunk, she has the sass, but there's not much else there similar to Drake. And Sully was probably my favorite, even though his role was completely cut out for a big fat majority of the game after the big twist, oh, they killed him, except not really. I mean, you knew he wasn't dead. Come on. They're not going to introduce that character and then not continue to use him. Come on. I did not believe he was dead for a second in the prologue or the early chapters, but you know, he plays off the characters well. I can say this, that by this point, as I'm recording this, I've also completed Uncharted 2, which I will say right now, they definitely fleshed out the characters better, and now they feel like their own characters as opposed to just your cookie cutter, which is fantastic. I mean, all around the voice acting was really good, especially, again, Nolan North and the villains. Elena's was weird. I don't think it was the voice actor. I think it was more of the direction of the voice actor. It was just weird emphasis on certain sentences that it was just a little jarring in the situation. I was curious after I completed the game. I wanted to do a little online research into the fandom, and I found out that generally the reputation of the first one is that it's the worst of the 4 Uncharted games, which is kind of funny because usually there's a huge pocket of any given community that will fight tooth and nail and say that the first game in their beloved series, whatever it might be, is the best. You know, there's those purists that when you change a little something in the sequels, like, oh, that's a big no. And I mean, there's a few game series I can think of that I might like the first the best. But anyway, at the time of reading that, it gave me hope that I was going to enjoy the sequels significantly more. And I also read that the even numbers are the most popular games in the series, Uncharted 2 and Uncharted 4. Uncharted 4 does not shock me whatsoever because obviously it was the most recent one. It had technological updates that you could deal with, and as the games have went into a very cinematic direction lately, I could definitely see how that the game series would evolve into being, you know, a modern day banger. So I'm looking forward to playing the 4th one. As I said, I'm going to review the 2nd one as well because I have completed that one. Overall, I definitely did like the 2nd one significantly more than the 1st one, but we'll get into that in another video. So let me compare Uncharted 1 to some other games released in 2007. Now, if there's any Uncharted fans watching this video right now, I apologize. It's really not even in the realm of possibility to where I can include Uncharted 1 as a favorite game in 2007. It honestly wouldn't even scratch the surface. So 2007 saw games like Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn, which is definitely my #1 game of that year. I love the Fire Emblem series, and Radiant Dawn is probably my 2nd favorite game in the entire Fire Emblem series. So yeah, Uncharted doesn't even come close to holding a candle to that game as far as I'm concerned. We also had BioShock 1, which is far and away, Uncharted 1 and BioShock aren't even in the same fucking universe as far as enjoyment and quality goes. BioShock is so much better in every fucking way imaginable. It's so much better. You also had Halo 3, which I really enjoyed for a time, online and the campaign, playing with buddies. You also had the very first Assassin's Creed released in that tier. And again, that I mentioned it earlier in the video, but you had the climbing aspects in that, and it was so much more fun in Assassin's Creed 1. The world was obviously significantly more vast. Altair handled significantly better than Drake did. So I'm giving the win to Assassin's Creed 1. Other games, just gonna list them off here. We had Mario Galaxy 1 in 2007. We had the first Portal. We had The Witcher, the very first Witcher game, The Darkness, and Super Paper Mario. So really, Uncharted just doesn't come into the conversation when I talk about the best games of 2007. With all that being said, I know I sounded like a negative Ned this entire video, and I'm sorry, I am, but it's just Uncharted 1 was very much an okay experience. It was okay. I'm glad I played it. but I'm going to tell you right now, I will never play it again. It is done. It is shelved forever. Goodbye. It was nice to meet you. But it laid a foundation. It laid a foundation, and as I said, I did like the second one more. I'll talk about that in the next review video. And I look forward to playing the third and fourth and the spin-off with Chloe. And I apologize, but I do not remember the name of the other character that stars in Chloe's Uncharted game. I'm glad I finally dipped my toes into this series because I have been a PlayStation fan since towards kind of the end of the PS3 era. And I loved my PlayStation 4. I still love it. And I love my PlayStation 5 so far. So I wanted to make sure to familiarize myself with one of their flagship series by Naughty Dog. I mean, Naughty Dog is a fantastic studio, and I have a lot of respect for them, even if I kind of have a love-hate relationship with Last of Us 2. But this isn't about Last of Us 2. Let's not bring that up. It doesn't belong in this conversation. I have said my piece. That is all I have to say about Uncharted 1. I really appreciate you being here, taking a look at this video. Let me know what you think. Am I a complete jackass for not appreciating this game as much as you? Am I totally on point? Have I struck a gold? I don't know. I'm going to keep doing reviews for some AAA games as I continue to gear my channel more towards your under-the-radar type experiences in indie games and other horror games. Oh, did you just squeak at me? Did you just squeak? Huh? You want some soft food? Is that what you're doing? All right. Wrapping it up, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate you. This is, of course, the part of the video where I might tell you who to like and who to subscribe to, but I'm not in the business of telling people what to do. However, if you found your time with me valuable today, please do throw me a like, subscription, and follow me on Twitter. Please do all of those things as it helps me beat the game that is YouTube. All that being said, thanks again. We'll see you next time, and have a good rest of your night. Bye-bye.